Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Trial Focus Show. And I'm really just pleased and excited to be talking to Kelly Chanfrau this afternoon. Kelly and I are colleagues, of course, and I've had the privilege of working with Kelly in a trial focus case. And we'll talk a little bit about this as we go through this. But Kelly, good afternoon.
Hey, Marcus, it's a pleasure to be here and to be talking with you. I'm truly honored to be here.
Well, it's the same privilege and honor for me. So I'd like to just dive in if we could. Kelly, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. What led you to the practice of law?
Great. Well, I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, and my grandfather was a Marine fighter pilot. My great-grandmother was a court reporter for Volusia County, and she actually moved to Volusia County from Texas. She escaped an abusive husband and started a court reporting business in the 20s. And she ended up being the court reporter for Volusia County for over 30, 40 years. Like, she covered everything. And then my grandfather started a court reporting business. My mom's a teacher. And my father, William Chanfrau Sr., is a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer. And he is, when I tell you he's the best trial lawyer I've ever seen or known, I mean it full-heartedly. He is like Elvis in the courtroom. He's amazing. And when I was growing up, we sat around the kitchen table and talked about my dad's cases all the time. We talked about his wins. We talked about his losses. I grew up listening to the stories of the people he represented. And, some of the cases were just absolutely tragic. But, as a little girl, I grew up listening to them, and I loved trial shows. I love telling stories. My dad would sit around and tell stories all the time. And I work now with my brother. He's an amazing trial lawyer. My sister-in-law is a trial lawyer. My uncle is a trial lawyer. So, I went to college, and after college, I went and worked in advertising in Boston for a little while, but decided that my true passion was telling stories, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And
here we are.
Yeah. So I moved back to Florida and went to law school, and here we are. Yeah.
So have you worked in your family's law firm since you have practiced, or since you returned to Florida?
No, I went to Stetson College of Law, and then immediately after Stetson, I worked for a large employment and labor firm called Ford Harrison now.
Sure.
And I worked there. I started as a summer associate and then worked my way up to being a partner. And in 2010, after I tried a case in federal court in Texas, I decided I was going to be a plaintiff's lawyer. So because I'd kind of had a little bit of enough of defense work, and that if I was going to work that hard, I was going to represent people. Just kind of had a shift after that case that I tried in Texas. Yeah.
And that was the kind of work your family had done as you were growing up that you got to watch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I really kind of love the story of people. I love people's stories and what happens to them,
Sure.
and their emotions and how they survive and how they become better. And the hero. I love the story, people surviving and kind of fighting for the rights. I've just always been intrigued by all of that. And so moved back, decided to leave Ford and Harrison and come back and work with my brother and my dad here in Daytona Beach, Florida. They have a personal injury practice. And so I joined them and brought a labor and employment practice to the firm, and started practicing personal injury and wrongful death, which I love that too. But I also have my plaintiff's employment practice as well.
Sure. So, of course, working in a family firm, what are the pluses and minuses of that environment? We heard some of the pluses, but are there minuses? I mean, what's it like to be in a family firm?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think probably the biggest thing that I had to learn quickly working with my family was that you always have to assume everyone has the best intentions with everything they do. Like you have to have this mindset all the time when you're working with your family, because you are with your family constantly. I mean, we have dinner Sunday nights with my dad and my mom and my brother. We travel together. So the most important in my life, my most important relationships are with my family. And an argument about a case, or a strategy for a case, or how an employee is acting, you can't let those things get in the way and
Right.
and hold grudges. You just have got to look over it and realize that the primary focus of my life is my family. um
Sure.
so that is, because, and I learned very quickly that if I get upset at my father or my brother over something, it affects everything. you know Home life, family life. It just, we want to all get along in the fishbowl and love each other. So
Right.
that, you really kind of have to have a higher sense of like getting along
Well,
and
15,
really.
yeah, 14, 15 years later, it appears to have worked.
Right. Well, I always assume, I tell my brother, and I talk about this all the time. I mean, I assume with everything that he does, he has wonderful intentions for me, and that he loves me, and that every decision he's making for the firm is for the best. And my husband also works here. So I am surrounded by men. And my husband, as our staff is very much female, our team, but my husband works here, and too, so I'm working with my husband and my father and my brother. So we all know we love each other, and we always, I always keep everything in that scope, because it can affect everything else. If you want to love each other, that's the most important thing.
Sure, sure. So let's talk a little bit about the labor and employment practice that you have developed within that firm framework. You've talked about your experience doing personal injury work, but of course, employment practice is an animal of its own. You and I both practice in that area. We're both board certified, but maybe the audience needs a little bit of some input from you and I about what's unique, if you will, about employment practice. So I'd throw that out to you. What is unique about plaintiff's employment practice as compared to other types of trial practice?
So it's, and plaintiff's employment law is very different than a normal plaintiff's personal injury firm. You can, I mean, it's all based upon statutes and regulations. There is no common law here. There is no, I run a stop sign and T-bone somebody, and, I mean, there is nothing like this. So, everything is based upon statutes and is highly regulated. There's 83 laws in the state of Florida that regulate employees and how you can treat employees. So, you've really, if you're going to do plaintiffs employment work, there are a lot of traps. There's quick deadlines for when things have to be filed with EEOC charges. There's shorter statute of limitations, which, so you kind of have to be abreast of that. The compared to other practices, the judicial, the judiciary, unfortunately or fortunately, if you're listening to this podcast, has become conservative, very conservative with respect to the laws. So you really need to understand where you're filing, and why, and kind of really making sure that you're bringing cases. You're not just bringing a case for the jury, you're bringing a case for the judge.
Well, you sort of touch upon something that I know is an issue, and that is that summary judgment is a real possibility in these cases. Has that been your experience?
When I did defense work. Yes, it is. When I did defense work, before I switched to the plaintiff side in labor and employment, I filed a motion for summary judgment in every single case.
Yeah.
And through doing that, you realize that you're going to win even if you shouldn't, you're going to win some of those. And so just to expect it. So, really, yeah, you're going to face a summary judgment if, the case doesn't resolve in every single case. So you need to be thinking strategically towards summary judgment early in the case and getting declarations and witness statements and things of that nature so that you can survive, because it's coming.
So as a plaintiff attorney, you've got to really be thinking about the elements from the very beginning, as well as anticipating from the very beginning the affirmative defenses. I mean, it's from intake on. At least that's been my experience. I don't know about you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you don't, I mean, you have to really be thinking what is going to survive summary judgment. And if this case is not going to survive summary judgment, you really shouldn't take the case,
Right.
in my view. I mean, if it can't survive summary judgment, you're going to put a lot of work into it and really not get anything out of it and ring up your costs and fees and things like that. But yeah, so when you take a plaintiff's employment case, the first thing we do in our office is we start to get witness affidavits and declarations immediately. So we spend a lot of time on that.
Right.
Because, when I was doing defense work, that's what I learned got the plaintiff over the hump.
Right. Now, another
Witness statement, So
another hurdle that I think is out there is that even if you survive summary judgment and go to trial, if you're in federal court, you don't get much in the way of voir dire, or for those that don't know what that is, jury selection, question and answer. That's been your experience?
yes, exactly. The judges in federal court are, want to do voir dire themselves, and so they have a scripted out 10 to 15 question voir dire that they do themselves, and so that and many times will only let the lawyers do a 10-minute voir dire. So how we've handled that in the past is I have asked the judge to see her voir dire in federal court before at the case management conference, and then filed a motion to be able to conduct an additional voir dire for these reasons. And there's actually a motion out there that I have used and that other attorneys have used that actually has declarations from other federal judges saying how important it is to allow the plaintiff to get the adequate amount of voir dire and the defendant, honestly. So I think that should be done in federal court.
Right.
Really.
One other thing I wanted to touch upon in the employment law realm of the discussion is that you and I had a chance to work on a multi-plaintiff case. So just wondering about your perspective about multi-plaintiff cases and whether that comes with its own challenges, if you will.
It does, definitely. A multi-plaintiff market. I had the pleasure of working with Marcus last year. He was our trial consultant, jury consultant, did a fabulous job, and he really helped so much. And that was a 9-plaintiff case against 2 defendants in an employment case. And I will tell you that representing 9 separate plaintiffs is a difficult challenge, because really it's 9 separate cases that you need to try in one, and it brings incredible challenges. From witness preparation to plaintiff preparation to damages, to opening statements, to making sure you touch each plaintiff's case, to closing statement, making sure you touch each plaintiff's damages, making sure you touch liability, because when you have a multi-plaintiff case, you have to prove liability and damages as to each plaintiff. And that can be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
Sure.
Really. Absolutely. So we're talking about trial a bit. So maybe expanding this out a little more broadly in terms of scope. Do you have your own approach to preparing for trial? I know you've talked a little bit about, sort of the pre-trial, aspects of getting declarations and the like, but is there a Kelly Chanfrau approach to litigation and trial prep?
I think probably, that's a great question. I think probably in the past, and something that my dad taught me early on about trial preparation is you've got to start early preparing what is called a trial scenario.
What's that?
A trial scenario is a schedule of blocked out time with each day, who you're going to call, what evidence is going to be put in when, who's going to do it. It is incredibly detailed. And why are you doing that? So a trial scenario, my dad has just hammered this into me over and over again. He tried like 200 cases or more, so preparing a trial scenario early is the best advice I can give anyone about trying a case, is because it puts it out there, what you're going to do, when, why, what evidence you're going to put in, when, why, what evidence are you going to put in through what witness, how long your opening is. And then really you can look at this and rely on the schedule every day to kind of know what's happening. And when you see it all on paper, it really just kind of puts your mind at ease that you're on the right track.
You mentioned early on that you realized that you love telling stories, and obviously trial is a theater, if you will, to tell a story. I mean, how does storytelling weave into your work?
Well, I love that. Like, I think that storytelling, in my perspective, when you're a plaintiff's lawyer, and I've learned this through reading books and through, I was a creative writing major in college and an English major, and I wanted to go to film school, and then took some writing classes in Boston after college, and really finding the story. They call it finding the story of what happened to your client, and being able to tell that story to a jury is what the case is about. And, you can use, in my perspective, if you find the story of what happened to your client early, and you're able to tell the story of your client to defense, to the mediator, to early on, your client will be in such a better position, because the defense wants to create chaos early.
Yes.
So you want to avoid that chaos by telling a wonderful story that fits and makes sense, that you're like, that fits.
Some folks that teach in the trial arena talk in terms of villains and heroes and that sort of thing. Do you see storytelling in that sort of framework, or not?
I do. I do. I think, I think that, finding the story of who's right and who's wrong, and finding, yes, absolutely, who is the victim, who is the hero, and really trying to, who is the villain. And really, like Marcus, you and I talked about, is creating, turning your plaintiff into a victor,
right?
A survivor, someone that when the jury or judge is looking at, that they like this person because they admire their qualities, right?
Right. And there's some great literature out there. I think of Jesse Wilson, I believe is his name, who has written about that whole approach of, and his book is From Victim to Victor.
Yes.
So the whole notion of casting your client more as a victor than a victim resonates with juries far better.
I believe it does. And when I'm thinking back to a case I tried back in 2014, one time, where I, using, this was a woman that had been in the Navy, and she was sexually harassed and discriminated against, and, horribly. And the defense was just pounding, she was in the Navy, this never could have offended her. She was in the Navy, she's used to this type of information coming at her. And we turned it into, no, she fought for her country. She shouldn't have been having to put up with this in the first place. Right. She's a hero. She was in the Navy. she's standing up for her rights, making that transition really resonated with the jury for sure.
Right.
Being able to
So,
do that.
yeah, we're wanting to, keep the time frame, appropriate here. So let me ask you a couple more questions. Are there any moments in trial that stand out in your mind, in your career, that as you look back are sort of, milestone moments for you?
There's two, and I'll try to
Okay.
keep it short and sweet. One time I was cross-examining someone, and he, I was ready for him. He got up there and he testified on direct, completely lied through his teeth to the defense lawyer. And for some reason, I had grabbed a clip from his deposition and asked him, and then stood up and said, did I just hear you say your wife was sexually harassed and discriminated against at her prior job and it upset you, or something along these lines?
Right.
He was like, oh yes, I was crying. It was horrible. We had to go see therapy and blah, blah. And I had my paralegal play the clip of him testifying during his deposition when I clearly had asked him, has your wife ever been sexually harassed? He's like, nah, so
Right.
that was a great moment, because somehow my paralegal and I had discussed using that clip, just saving it just in case he kind of went off the rails, and he did. So after we played that, I sat down. I said, I have no further questions. I sat down and looked over at the jury, and the jury was like, oh my God, this guy's such a liar. Like, I loved that. And then another time, the first time I tried a case with my father, the jury was out. We were waiting for the jury to come back. And we were sitting there waiting, like, oh, the panic. We were like, gosh, I hope we win, that waiting time. And we were we heard that the jury was back. Everyone goes into the courtroom, and we sit down, and I hear this knock, and it goes, dun, 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 dun. And my dad stood up and looked around and said, well, friends, that's a happy knock. And we all started. I looked at my dad, and the defense lawyer just looked down and shook his head, and of course we did get a verdict. And as soon as the verdict was read, the defense lawyer ran out of the courtroom. I don't know why that sticks out, just because I love my dad. He's so funny,
Yeah.
I know.
Well, to kind of wrap this up in the sort of the spirit of how he was your mentor, I want to pose this to you, and that is, do you have any advice for aspiring younger trial lawyers?
I do. I would say there's a lot of really good books out there that you can read, that are helpful. I would, anything by Mark Lanier is wonderful.
Sure.
David Ball and Damages, I would read that. The Reptile, there's all this wonderful plaintiffs, trial lawyer literature out there that really is fun to read and is really engaging and can teach you so much about storytelling and things of that nature. And then also the biggest thing I would say is, don't be afraid to try a case.
Yes.
I have won cases and I've lost them, and I've learned so much more from my losses. And, I remember I was in a courtroom one time in front of a judge's office, and on the judge's door, she had a sign that said, it's okay to go to trial.
I've never seen that.
It was like a warning to all the lawyers, like, oh my God, it's okay. We got to go, but it's okay. Like, sometimes your client deserves their day in court and they want it, and it's your job to take it. And if you've got a really good case, why not try it?
Right.
Try it, because that's how you get better. I try a case. Who cares? Take
Right.
it. See what happens.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, it's been fun, and I want to let the audience know how they can reach you. So, can you tell us how we can do that? And we'll have a graphic up on the screen that will put that up for them visually. But how can they reach you?
Sure. Well, it's been my honor to be here, Marcus. You are an amazing, amazing person to work with. Really, you are amazing. And I can't say that enough. You're so smart. I really enjoyed working with you when we worked together in our trials. So you can reach me. I'm at Chanfrau and Chanfrau in Daytona Beach, Florida. We have an office in DeLand and in Palm Coast. Our number is 386-258-7313. And then my email is kelly@chanfraulaw.com. So if anyone ever wants to call and chat, I'm always up for it.
All right. All right. So hopefully we'll have you back on. And I thank you so much. It's been just a fun experience. And I've learned, about you even more in just this little chat we've had. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.